I'm particularly happy to introduce our Sheth Distinguished Lecturer today because Rosemary doubly embodies the theme of creativity. In addition to, and perhaps visible to a wider audience than her own considerable scholarly and literary contributions, are the durable structures that she has established at Emory to spotlight the creations of others. To quote Dean and University librarian Yolanda Cooper, "When Rosemary takes the reins, beautiful things happen." The first time I saw Rosemary take the reins was over 40 years ago when we were both beginning PhD students in what was then the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. I was a representative on the Graduate Student Council, and she was president. We finished our degrees within a year of each other and completed our families along a similar path. But from then on, our paths diverged as Rosemary's extraordinary leadership skills flourished to the benefit of all at Emory. As we have circumambulated to play on the title of one of her current projects, which I'll get back to in a minute, we've taken different directions in our walking around of Emory from those graduate school days, finally to come full circle to Emeritus College. To review just a few of the footprints Rosemary has left: professor and researcher, member of the president's cabinet, is vice president and secretary of the university. Under her leadership, the Donna and Marvin Schwartz Center for the Performing Arts became a reality. During her final role as director of the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archives and Rare Book Library, she oversaw its physical transformation into a gorgeous, welcoming space filled with light and accessible to scholars at any stage of their journey. To name just a few of the distinguished acquisitions, she oversaw collections from Seamus Heaney and Alice Walker, early letters of Barack Obama, and she even contributed her own research archive to complement documents from the Flannery O'Connor collection. Back in 2005, Rosemary took on the role of liaison with university distinguished professors, who then included Salman Rushdie and Maestro Robert Spano. And she had the idea of setting up public conversations to highlight the importance of creativity and imagination, not just in the arts, but in every discipline and pursuit. During these conversations, thinkers, creators, and innovators in their field offer a peek into their creative thoughts and processes. Past participants are a very distinguished group. Just a few of them: Margaret Atwood, President Jimmy Carter, Philip Glass, Alice Walker, and many, many more. The archive of what Emory has now endowed as the Rosemary Magee Creativity Conversations includes over 60 recordings featuring not only those whose names may be household words, but also groups from a broader community discussing the role of creativity in their own lives. And the conversations continue. Notably this week in the virtual Decatur Book Festival, not virtual, the keynote address by Jericho Brown followed a similar format as he was in conversation with Mathwan Howard. Next week will be another major conversation highlighting the life and work of Pelham McDaniels, curator of African American collections, whom we lost so tragically early last April. And then finally, the closure of the Decatur Book Festival, October 4th, Rosemary will again be in conversation with, in the end note, with Natasha Trethewey. A minute ago, I mentioned Circumambulations. This is the title of a series of short film collaborations that Rosemary is doing with Hal Jacobs, and it was inspired by her residencies at Ham Beach Center for Creative Arts and Sciences in North Georgia. And in her spare time, she's putting finishing touches on her next book. I wanted to just say something that the past chair of the Emory Board of Trustees, Ben Johnson, said of Rosemary. The thing about Rosemary is that it was never about Rosemary. Nothing she did was motivated by anything other than what was best for Emory, its faculty and students, and her love of education. When you're able to present yourself without guile as she has, it gives you a power most people don't understand. So I'm happy to present Rosemary Magee, champion of the arts on campus and beyond, and her lecture is titled The Music Box.
Good morning, everyone. Those of you who are here in Atlanta and elsewhere, I must say I was very touched by seeing your voices and hearing your voices and seeing your faces appear. Most of you have been part of this journey with me in different phases and over these 40 years. And I'm very honored to be here with the Emeritus College in particular today on this topic. I want to thank the Emeritus College. I want to thank you, Holly, for that really meaningful introduction. Gray, Diane, Gretchen, others on the Mind and Manners Committee for choosing me. And really the great generosity of Jag and Madhu Sheth for their presence here. Okay, how'd that go? Yes, and so the topic of this lecture, talk, more discussion, perhaps conversation, is the music box. And I think the meaning of that title will become clearer as we move forward together. And Holly mentioned the creativity conversations, and that was kind of a wing and a prayer and a bit of serendipity and some really remarkable opportunities offered to me, and that grew into a series beyond my wildest imaginations and included not just me as a moderator, but many, many people across the campus and beyond. So I'm very honored. The inspiration of it is that conversations themselves are creative. That when we have a conversation with someone, we learn things. We learn things about ourselves, and we also learn things about other people, and we have ideas that we are able to share, and in some cases in a public forum. It's not just the famous people. It's many students who are and will be even more famous have participated, and you might even have some creativity conversations with members of your family and get to know them better. And you can see my husband and myself, for example, up in the left-hand corner, enjoying the eclipse up there at the Hambidge Center, and other members of my family who've been remarkable parts of this journey with me and have always been there to support me. So the creativity conversations have been quite meaningful, and normally that involves people being in close location with one another. We have found other means now. It's amazing how creative we can be in doing that, but of late, most of my creativity conversations, perhaps yours as well, have been with myself. I've been talking to myself, and I've been you know, exploring some ideas. And I've also been thinking about the various things that I learned from the other conversations that I've had. And so I decided to query myself here in this creativity conversation. And as I do so, and I share with you some of both my findings and insights, I hope you will do the same with yourself. So it's meant to engage you in the conversation as well. Speaking of findings, these are things that I would often focus on in the conversations, or the conversations would yield. I tried not to have a script, but to make it actually about the moment that we were in. Seamus Heaney reminds us from this beautiful poem, had I not been awake, I would have missed it. And it's a reminder to all of us that even in these challenging times, especially on a gorgeous day as it is here in Atlanta right now, there are many things to be awake for, and many things to experience, such as our lovely times that we've had together, and so many things that we've learned from one another. And oftentimes in the creativity conversations, I would ask my correspondent conversationalists, so when did you first begin to think of yourself as a musician? Or when did you first begin to think of yourself as a poet or as a scientist? What were those moments, and how did it feel? And in fact, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Seamus Heaney in his home in Dublin, which was an unexpected honor. And I asked him that question. And he shared with me a few things that I'd like to share with you today. The first one being that for him, as I think for many of us, whatever we're working on, writing has been a journey where each point of arrival turned out to be a stepping stone rather than a destination. So those stepping stones that we take, we're not quite sure what direction they're going to lead us. But when I asked him about his own stepping stones, when did he first begin to think of himself as a poet? He shared with me the story that when he moved from Northern Ireland to the south of Ireland in County Wicklow in 1972, well before we came to know him, and he went to register his children at their school, the local school. And the registrar asked him, a variety of questions. And when they asked him the question about himself, what was his occupation? He said, well, I'm a writer, I write. And the registrar said, well, what kinds of things do you write? And he said, well, I write essays and newspaper columns and articles, and I write poems. And the registrar said, oh, you're a poet. And he wrote down the word poet in the little occupational field that was there for the registration. And he shared with me that he felt an enormous sense of honor and also a sense of responsibility. That for many years, it remained hard for him to say to people, I'm a poet. He wanted to live up to it. He wanted to take on that mantle of responsibility. And so it came to him in an unexpected moment, that sense of identity. And when it did come to him, he felt it was something that he had to live up to. As Holly mentioned, I've spent a good bit of time at the Hambidge Center, which I'm very grateful for. And that's up in North Georgia, and I'm actually returning there tomorrow. And it's a place of nature and reflection and creativity, and a place where one can work on whatever artistic or scientific projects that may have taken over your life. And for me, not that I would compare myself to Heaney in very many ways, but in this way, when the first time I went to the Hambidge Center, about 20 years ago, I sort of arrived there in a rush. I was late leaving Atlanta. Something had come up at work and I was feeling anxious, and I arrived there in time for what was then, until recently, the communal dinner. And people said, well, nice to meet you. What do you do? And I just went off on some sort of spiel about what I did at Emory. Who knows what I said or what I was up to at that particular moment that had delayed me. But eventually they said, no, what are you doing here? And I said, well, oh, I write things. And they said, similar feeling, oh, well, you're a writer. And that was the first time I really had a sense of myself, had an identity of myself as a writer in ways other than writing strategic plans or emails or reports or scholarly articles. It was a different kind of feeling. And I also felt that sense of, I felt very humbled by that idea. And it also inspired me. So this sense of identity is one that you may want to ask yourself. When did you first think of yourself as a scientist or a gardener or an actor, a director, a musician, whatever it might be? When did that first occur to you? It might be your vocation. It might also be one of your many avocations. Along with identity, I frequently ask my conversationalists, what has influenced you? What are the things that have influenced you in your life and in your work? And with Natasha Trethewey, whom many of us know and had the privilege of working with over her many years at Emory, we know that her poetry is based in history. She's somebody who really immerses herself in a history, whether it be a history of a place or a time or a moment, a region, or her own personal history. And as she says, my own journey in becoming a poet began with memory, with the need to record and hold on to what was being lost. And in her very powerful and heartbreaking new memoir, Memorial Drive, which I highly recommend, even those of us who know Natasha quite well learn more about a very tragic history that takes place in a region and as well in our city, as the title would indicate, and her own personal history that that follows that journey of Memorial Drive. So history and memory are very powerful influences for Natasha, as is place. And as I thought about influence as well, sometimes influence can come to us from other forms of art or artwork. And we can learn, even if we haven't studied a particular form of art. And here we learn from our friend and colleague, Catherine Mitchell. And this is an idea, a very elegant, refined work. Artist's home, what I learn from that as I look at it, I have a sense of being centered, centered with the art and centered with the artist. And what Catherine shared with me in ways, excuse me, Catherine, is that she does the work, and through the work, that's how she learns where she's been and where she's going. And so we don't always know, whatever pathway we're on, where we are, where we've been even, and where we're going. And her artwork and those words have influenced me in my own thoughts and my own work as well. Place has been a powerful influence for me, and it might have been for you as well. And these are some photographs of, and one of an artwork of a place called Isle of Hope, which is off the coast of Savannah. And this is where my mother is from and where I actually was born. My immediate family was in the military, but I happened to have been born there, and my mother lived and grew up there. And my grandparents had many kind of eccentric businesses, including a seafood restaurant, a dance pavilion. They had sort of a petting zoo at one point. And you'll see here in the lower right-hand corner, they were, yes, it's true, terrapin farmers. They raised terrapin. And this is a picture of my grandfather and my mother as a young girl in the terrapin pen. And my great-grandfather discovered a way to incubate the terrapin egg. So this was all part of making a living. It was a very enchanting place for me to go. Normally, I was there in the summers, where I had the opportunity to spend the summer with my grandmother. My grandmother Rose, musical theater was performed there on the pavilion every summer. A very magical place for me. And they were always looking for ways they were entrepreneurs to make a living. And one of these ways is that my great-grandfather established in a Victorian home there right on the waterway, a music room. And you can see it here. And every single item in the music room is in fact a music box. They are all music boxes. They were called music boxes, even though they might have been bird cages, they might have been hat racks, pictures, the bed, the chair. Every single item in the statues in this room was a music box. And this fascinated me as a child because I realized what appeared to be one thing was something else altogether. And in the lower right-hand corner, you can see my great-grandfather, Alexander Barbie, and he has a small piano there that's a music box. And he actually has a terrapin, a very special, smart pet terrapin, Toby, who's playing that piano. Toby had many talents. He also knew how to wink at the ladies and shake hands with the gentlemen, according to family lore and according to my great-grandfather. So, but it was the music boxes that I was allowed to look at and occasionally touch and hear that really especially fascinated me as a child, and continue to do that as well, because they look like one thing, but there's something else altogether. We begin to learn from the music boxes what other states of being even an object might have, or a place might have. These are some of the music boxes that remained with me and with members of my family. So there's a chair there. You can sit in that chair, wind it up and listen to the music when you sit down. There's a piano very similar to the one that Toby was playing. A decanter and glasses were also musical items for my members of my family. And there's an item in the upper right-hand corner. Just stare at it for a minute, and afterwards we can discuss what that item was. Maybe you have a few guesses as to what it. But these are all music boxes. They're one thing. They look like one thing, but they seem to be something else altogether. And they have dual functions, or maybe in some cases triple functions. And that idea of forms and shapes having many, many different qualities and states, it can also be true for books. And 3 of these here, shown here by these fantastic artists, are actually books that are part of the Rose Library Rare Book Collection. And they're fascinating. Each one has a story. I'll share with you that the one in the lower right-hand corner is Burnt Church by Amos Kennedy. It's covered by newspaper print and headlines about burned churches that were burned in the South, that have been burned. And when you take off the lid, what looks like the roof, and you look inside, there is a burnt Bible from one of those churches. So it's a very, very powerful statement. It's a book, but it looks like something else altogether. It's an artist's book. The one right above that, that's part of my own collection by my good friend and our colleague, Anna Leo, where turns out hope is the thing with feathers. So books, like boxes, have many different incarnations. And this music box, this idea of the music box, has been very meaningful to me, has been one of a major influence in my life. As well, I learned from the conversational partners, you know, what are their insights? Where do they get their insights? And what are they? What do they bring to the world? How do they learn about the world? How do they learn about themselves? And here we learn from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. That picture was taken in Dharamsala, India. I had the pleasure to go there with an Emory group. And he shares with us that true change is within. That doesn't mean, of course, that we don't want to change systems and institutions and laws. We do. And, but I think we're learning and relearning, even in the moment we're living right now, that for all those to really have a place and to make a difference, true change must come from within ourselves. And so this kind of insight, this insight of being inside and finding that change, is what the Dalai Lama has shared with us. For me, I've had other experiences that relate to that in a kind of way. And my good friend and former colleague, Jennifer Fabric, was a university architect for a number of years at Emory. Here she's having a Zen moment. And if you want to thank people who really worked hard to make the campus master plan come into being in the 90s and 2000s, and since then, Jen was one of the primary architects for that, as well as worked on many, many projects with me and others. And I enjoyed the pleasure of working with architects, even though I had no skill or particular background. But what I learned from Jen in particular is that we often think about being creative we think we need to think outside the box. And that's true. We do need to think outside the box, to be sure. But she says the real challenge is thinking inside the box. Most projects have constraints. Those constraints might be limitations of size or type or site or budget, whatever you can think of, there are constraints. And the envelope itself of the building. Here we see the Candor Library, the renovated Candor Library. Many of us remember what the unrenovated Candor Library looked like. There was a box, how to return it to its former glory. Jen was a leader in that effort. And this idea of thinking inside the box has proved very meaningful to me and helpful, and I think helpful to all of us right now today, because we are facing more constraints than we might have imagined for this moment. Archivists too learn to think within the box. And they may end up with archivists that arrive in some kind of shape like this. Perhaps you have such a space in your basement or attic or garage or wherever it may be. And, you know, in some cases, it's transforming materials from those kinds of boxes or other bizarre places to boxes that the archivists use and that store our reflections, our history, our moments, our insights, all these things we're talking about. And they're put in order for us so that we can access them. And through our access of them, other things unfold. I have with me right here, Gary Hawk's book, Emery's Place, Meaning in a University Landscape. Well, in addition to his great memory and other fantastic conversations, Gary accessed the university archives. So he went inside the box to discover the history of Emory and to share that with us, as so many other great thinkers and writers and scholars have done. So this insight of what happens within the box is what opens us up, is meaningful to me, and perhaps you have similar reflections to draw upon. Holly mentioned the renovation of the what used to be marble and now into the Rose Library, kind of transformation. This was a very beautiful and lovely spot, marble was, and many of us went there. We had used it for many purposes. I saw Ginger on the Zoom call a little bit earlier, and I'm grateful to her and all the work that she put in at the library, and especially on behalf of marble. And yet the spaces had become limited in what they had to offer. We didn't have a lot of room to expand the footprint up there at the top of the Woodruff Library. We had a little room, and we did that. So we were basically thinking inside this box. And as a result of that, and you can see in Gray's background here today, the Rose Library. And we thought within that box with a little bit of stretching out onto the balcony. And we were able to create together spaces that just opened up the archives, that invited people into the archives, and had multiple spaces for reading and research, and especially for teaching, where in the classroom that we see there with the evening in the background, over 200 classes in a regular year are taught there, and all types of classes, public health, literature, history, religion, you name it. And so with the opening up that box, but actually working within that box, yielded this experience that we now have of the Rose Library. I will share with you that they are open by appointment. So if you're dying to dig into the archives and it's something you want to pursue, you can make an appointment. And if you don't want to go there, you can also, there's an opportunity to ask one of the archivists online or to call in. So that was a quite remarkable experience, and a real pleasure to be a part of that and to join with others, including our friend and Emory alum, Stuart Rose, of course, for thanking him for his support. So this idea brings us back to the music box. This particular music box is part of my own personal portion of the collection. And I always loved it when I was a child. I'd look at it, and occasionally my parents would let me, pick it up and wind it up and play it. And I thought it was just beautiful and carefully crafted. Most of the music boxes, I will add, were custom made by my grandfather. For him on his behalf, my great-grandfather and my grandfather. So they were custom made, and they were part of that enormous collection in the music room. This one I always like because, again, it looks like one thing on the outside, a very pretty box, but when you open it up, it's something else altogether. And in this case, it held cigarettes. Now, no one in my immediate family, thankfully, smoked, so we didn't store cigarettes in the music box. However, when I was allowed to look and touch it and play with it under strict supervision, I might add, my mother would let me put my crayons there, and sometimes my jewelry, little findings of jewelry. So the music box, what's going on inside the box is as interesting as what's going on outside the box. And we learn new things about it by opening it up. So this idea of the inside the box and the music box, part of those insights. Now, to be creative, it turns out, requires a bit of invention. And you can see Salman Rushdie here, who's kind of the trickster, thinking, what's about to come next. And so I asked him about this, where do you get your ideas? Where do they come from? How does this happen to you? And what he tells us is that we are all dreaming creatures. To dream is to create. So that is, if you've been sitting around during this pandemic, not doing much of anything, but having occasional daydreams, and unfortunately, perhaps a few nightmares, rest assured you're actually inventing, you're being very creative. We're all dreaming creatures. And he tells us to dream is to create. Sometimes, however, we have to take it another step. And we have to do something with all of that dreaming. And to understand part of this idea of invention, I turn to my friend and colleague and fellow participant today, Brenda Bynum. That picture is of Brenda and me in Paris a number of years ago. Let's go again, Brenda. Of course, we were working hard on Emory's behalf, actually, the Beckett Project. With the Beckett Project. But Brenda tells us in her world of theater, the abiding principle is forward motion. So we take these dreams and this idea of invention, but the abiding principle is forward motion with seamless and uncluttered transitions. And my experience is that when Brenda is directing something, in fact, those transitions are seamless and uncluttered. And that is what makes theater or any kind of performance especially wonderful, draws us into that world. I do have to say, not all of my transitions are seamless and uncluttered. But like many of you, when I look back on things that have happened to me, several of the things that Holly mentioned, that we worked on together, they weren't always seamless and uncluttered. They were a little awkward at times, or challenging, difficult. But in looking back on it and we see what we did together, we notice that sense of forward motion. And it all seems seamless now. So this sense of invention, I've learned from my conversationalists, both to dream and to move forward. So my own take on that, as I've been interrogating myself, is what I call drift and intention. For me, this is what the creative process is. And here we have a photograph of the inland waterway there at Isle of Hope, the place where my mother's family is from. And this idea of drift and intention is that sometimes you're just, allowing things to happen, the tides to come in and go out. You may be in a boat, you may drift in that boat, you may float on your back, any number of things. You're just allowing that moment of drift to occur. And then somehow, somewhere, sometime, occasionally, you get a sense of intention. What am I going to do with all this? How am I going to make something of it? We're lucky when that moment grabs us. And sometimes it does actually, sadly enough, take a pandemic, because I've been, drifting among various creative projects over the past many years, and now have had a lot more focus and have been working on a short story collection. I have many stories that I've written at Hambidge and elsewhere. You can see my thought process moving from a kind of drift on the bulletin board to drafts. And, one day soon, perhaps it'll be an actual book. I think it'll probably be an extremely rare book when that happens. But this is the idea of the intentionality taking over from many times of drifting, and I'm still drifting. Similarly, I've been working on a series of short films with my friend and colleague, Hal Jacobs, a videographer, and you've seen much of his work and met Hal, along with my close friend and colleague, Anna Leo. So there are 4 of these meditative pieces that focus on walking around a sacred object or space, the Circumambulation series. One of these is based on a trip to India that we took, the one I mentioned earlier. Another, actually at the Hambidge Center, called Hellbender Spirit. If you haven't had the occasion to meet a Hellbender, which you may see in the lower right-hand corner of this picture, they're very large salamanders, and one came upon myself and Anna when we were sitting in a pond at the Hambidge Center. So those 2 are part of the Circumambulation series. There will be 4 in all. Right now, I'm working with Hal on one that has to do with my husband and his journey in life and his particular talent as a dog whisperer, and somebody who helps others, especially animals, which we're calling for now the Doggie Lama. And then finally, the final one of this series will be about Isle of Hope, about the wanderings, meanderings, and circular pathways there at that place, Isle of Hope, from my family and from my childhood and still today. So those are a few of the driftings that I've had that are turning into something resembling intentionality. And that was about invention, the process of invention. But finally, we have to allow ourselves, which I think is hard for many of us, especially those of us who've been trained as academics, to just allow our imagination to take over. And follow the rainbow, if you will. That's actually a double rainbow there at Isle of Hope. And here we can follow the guidance of the great poet Rita Dove, where she encourages us to, from her poem, Dawn Revisited, imagine you wake up with a second chance. And so at this point in our lives, many of us have had multiple second chances. We've had third chances, we've had fourth chances, we've had fifth chances. We're having another chance now in many ways, difficult ways, but also through the Emeritus College and through the generosity of the Sheths, the opportunity to reimagine ourselves and our lives. I don't know about you, but some of my second chances or third chances have gone fairly well. Others have not gone that great. but some have been just fine. And the idea that every day you can wake up and experience a second chance, I think, is something that is encouraging to me personally, as a person, as somebody who's working to be creative, and also as a culture and as a nation, to think of ourselves together as having a second chance and more. So that sense of imagination returns us to the music box. Here's another one that's part of my personal collection, and it looks sort of staid and old-fashioned on the outside. And yet, when the music plays and it opens up, we begin to see what's happening inside the box. There are doors, and we open the doors. And as doors open, as in much of life, when we seek and find what's in the box, we can begin to see beyond it. And we can see what's on the other side. And it opens itself to us. So again, these music boxes fascinated me as a child, and as you can tell, still do, because they open us up, they open up, and as they open up, we open up as well. So there are my findings for you on these topics that you might query yourself about: identity, influence, insights, invention, and imagination. Accompanying me on many of these travels that I've taken and places I've been has been our friend and colleague who's joining us today from California, who is both a PowerPoint wizard and Zen master, although it's very rare to see Randy sitting still. Most of the time he's bustling around, but every now and then you can catch him in a quiet moment. And even all the way from California, he has helped me with this PowerPoint. So I asked Randy what he has to contribute to this creativity conversation. And he said, "You're meant to be where you are." And so, friends, we're here together today. And that is, in fact, where we're meant to be. One of the great journeys that Randy and I traveled along together was the transformation of one kind of box into another box altogether. And here, some of you will remember Annex B, which sat over there kind of behind the library near where the Goizueta Business School is today. For many, many years, it was meant to be a temporary building, but I know that Brenda, for one, will have had experiences, Randy, others in Annex B, where theater was headquartered, and that becoming transformed into another kind of box altogether, where great things could happen. In fact, I had a student ask me when the Short Center opened and the wheel, what was I hoping that would happen there? And I said, well, I was looking forward to the surprises, the things that we hadn't even thought of yet. We were honored to have the opportunity to see what happens inside that music box as it was going up. Some of you may have taken hard hat tours with us. Certainly Randy and I saw it, and others among you, what happened inside, how this music box was created, Emerson Concert Hall, named after our friend and philanthropist, the late Cherry Emerson, and someone who was both a scientist, a chemist, and a musician, loved music. And this is the inner workings of that music box at the Short Center. So what's happening inside the box, everything being built and calculated and squared off to be as acoustically sound, if you will, as possible, every single portion of it. And so here we see this box being built, being created, and we also see it in its finished form, with the acoustical panels that are hanging down, the shades that can be adjusted, the beauty of that very pristine place. That's very much the way the Short Center looks today. Emerson Concert Hall looks today. The music box awaits us. We're looking forward, I think, someday being together, but like all music boxes, it calls upon us when circumstances shift to rethink where we are and what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so today we still have the opportunity and pleasure of gathering together and listening to an orchestra. And that orchestra may be one that we know, may be one from New Zealand or what have you. But the music box has transformed itself in this way, or perhaps around the corner in a social distance way. One may be able to experience outdoors, music together, and see what the music box has to offer. This beautiful place that many of us have enjoyed together also someday, perhaps, we'll be back together, enjoying the music, in this case, created by the Emory Symphony Orchestra and the University Chorus, that is made up of students and colleagues who've brought beautiful music into our lives. We hope that day will come. We look forward to it. Perhaps it'll look a little bit different. Perhaps we'll experience it in a different way. But nonetheless, there it is in all of its splendor and beauty. And so those are my findings. That's what I've learned from the music box. That's what I've learned from many of you, my colleagues, my friends, my associates, my conversational partners. And I want to thank all of you. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I also want to thank Emory University, especially the Emeritus College, but the entire university, for giving us the kind of rich experiences and the incredible access that we've had to one another and other great thinkers to share our journey together. And I'm honored to share a little bit about my thoughts with you in this creativity conversation that focused on the music box.
It's time for questions. And if you want to make a question or a comment, just click on the participants list and use the raise hand, and Rosemary will recognize you.
Is that you, Morton?
Yes.
Okay. Greetings.
Hi. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed your presentation. I would like to add a few notes. At my stage of life of 96 years, I would like to add a single word to your final thoughts, and that you hope that day will come. Can we add the word soon to that? I hope that day will come. Thank you.
I accept that friendly amendment.
This is Jag, Madhu and Jag, Rosemary. So nice to see you.
Greetings.
Just great.
Yes, there you are. Okay.
It's so nice to see you after many, many months now.
Yes.
Always have enjoyed being with you wherever we were in social gatherings or functions at the university. And I'm so glad the committee chose you to be the speaker, even though it's virtual. It's just great. What a wonderful lecture. What a wonderful lecture. Thank you.
I'm grateful for our many times together at Emory, and especially grateful for this opportunity. So thank you both, Jag and Madhu, and I'm really honored to be with you today.
Thank you.
Gretchen?
Hi, can I be heard? Yeah, actually, I have a question for Jag and Madhu. I'm curious as to what they were thinking when they endowed this lecture series and specified that somehow the speaker should address or embody or both the theme of creativity and later life. Jag, I know you and Madhu both have done so much to support scholarly work, and we tend to separate that from creative work. But you endowed this lecture series specifically to support creativity in later life. And I'm just wondering what you were thinking when you did that.
It's the same thing. Active scholars, academics, are always curious. They're always learning, always want to create something. And there's a huge useful life left after they retire, because we live longer, we live more healthily, hopefully. And there's still so much of time that they can contribute back to the society and to the institution. We have a tremendous loyalty of people who retire from the institution. Now, we all love our alma mater when we graduate, clearly, but we spend more time in the institution where we work, where we contribute, and the institution gives you back what a lot. To create that legacy, as you have seen, every speakers at this series has been just great. So that's the joy.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's been wonderful to have the series as we have, and very inspirational.
So I see some other hands up. Holly, your hand is up.
Yes, hi. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the meditation of the whole thing, and I really, really appreciated that, Rosemary. It was great. A question that I have, something that I've sort of been thinking about, is with regard to the creativity conversations. It's not like an interview, and I think about there are other people who do similar kinds of conversations who may be more on the interview side, like Krista Tippett. I think of James Lipton, and Inside the Actors Studio, Bernard Pivot in France does that sort of thing. How do you think about it as opposed to an interview? How do you get the mindset for that?
Mostly in advance, of course, I try to invest myself in the person's work, what I know about the person. And then I make a few notes. I mean, in my early phases, I'm kind of compulsive. Like I actually will write a whole bunch of things down and, you know, have a little bit of an outline. But then as I get closer to the conversation, I just make a few notes. And I really, I try to have a pre-conversation just to say, we're going to let this go wherever it goes. And actually, the first public one I did was on behalf of Emory Libraries. I was asked to do one when I was in the fourth floor admin back then was Salman Rushdie. And it turns out he was a very easy mark, because he's a great conversationalist and he is very easy to talk to about almost any subject on earth. From, you know, going to the grocery store to Charles Dickens and William Shakespeare, two of his great topics of interest, as well as his own work. So, you know, just to let them know that there's going to be in that conversation a kind of drift in intention, and that it's going to be a bit of a back and forth with a focus on them, of course. Today I focused on myself, but normally, it's about them, but it is the kind of conversation that you and I might have, you know, over a cup of tea as well. Have that quality to it.
Thanks.
Catherine, so good to see you, my friend.
Okay. It was a wonderful lecture and very creative, I thought, and taking ideas from various writers and others and focusing on that music box idea and then evolving to the Schwartz Center. I thought that was so well done and just worked very well. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I've learned so much from you and admired your work for so long. It's really lovely to see you and hear from you. Okay, Bobby Patterson has her hand up. Hey, hello, friend.
Hi, dear friend. It's tremendous. Thank you so much. One of the things that struck me is, and it's so appropriate to the Emeritus College, Rosemary, is that there was this thread of history, the way Natasha is doing that on Memorial Drive. But I wonder if you could speak more to, in a sense, the way in which the narrative of events of your life at Emory and before Emory, it seems like you have a kind of third eye watching that history, or how do you attend to that history? It seems so woven in your creativity.
Thank you, Bobby. And, you know, Holly mentioned in her introduction that she and I had known each other since we were graduate students, and you and I have known each other that long as well. And we've traversed the campus and overlapped and intersected. So we've seen many things happen. One of the things that I like to say about my experience at Emory in particular is that I came for my PhD and ended up teaching for a while, then in the dean's office for many years. But that my own personal opportunities and sense of myself and my abilities grew as the university, you know, was really on a meteoric rise. And when we started out, the entire dean's office was contained within Whitehall, the upper level of Whitehall. That was it. There are a few more members of the dean's office nowadays, and certainly even when I was there. But, you know, to ride that wave of Emory and to be able to find a place and a voice and to work with people, and that job in particular, Gray and I worked together on several projects when he was in the biology department. We served on a search committee together related to the Hughes grant, and in many, many, many other capacities later on the Candler Concerts committee. And so I worked with many scientists, and then really when I was in the university administration, people in other parts of the university. So it was that kind of unfolding of my own sort of personal journey with that of the university. I feel enormous sense of gratitude to my parents. We were a military family. We lived all over the world. They were very interested in the different parts and cultures of the world that opened many doors for me. I was very shy, very bookish. And, you know, it was in that place at Emory, well, even when we were in that small office in a, very junior position, I was able to work closely with, the great minds of Emory and the great leaders of Emory as well, including Dr. Laney. So my own opening up into the world came from my parents traveling around the world and their great spirit, and also from the university itself. Thank you.
It's really good. So,
hello. Yes, Madhu?
Yes, just one small question. You never had any background for being an architect?
No.
I'm surprised, that you did such a wonderful job.
Well, I wasn't the architect. I was kind of I was sort of the interpreter. I was the person who was trying to take the academic ideas and aspirations and particular points of view and translate those to the architects. My husband was trained as an engineer. I knew a little bit about the engineering side of things, but no, I had no background in that. And when I periodically still, but used to give talks to students, various student groups, I always say to them, oh, I've never had any job that I had any preparation for, except perhaps the teaching of English 101 or courses like that. But for the most part, most of my jobs I had no background for whatsoever. So that I had many second chances.
really, that's so good. So
Yes,
good.
sometimes do you think when you have too many interests, does it clash with each other, or you are able to really put them down one after another?
Yeah, I had many years where I was doing a lot of multitasking, and I realize now that, the kind of focus that I've had more recently is beneficial. And I've also realized in preparing for this lecture and preparing to go to Hambridge tomorrow and a few other things in my life that I'm not as good today at multitasking as I once was. which probably is okay for my life in this moment. So thank you for that.
That's wonderful. Really, we admire this very much. You have done a wonderful job, especially, working with the swords. I mean, what you have done with over there is wonderful.
Well, there are many fine people who were part of that effort. A lot of faculty were the architects, the acousticians. My good friend, Randy Fullerton, who's here, really played a very significant and important role in bringing that. And of course, Donna and Marvin Schwartz, we have them to thank as well. But thank you. It is a beautiful space, and I actually live just across the street from the campus right now, not too far. I'd like to be able to walk, as I did last fall, to a concert, but that time will happen soon, we hope.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Rudy, how are you?
And you?
I'm doing okay, thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I enjoyed your talk very much because I'm interested in, I'm not saying I'm imaginative, but interested in the topic of imagination, and Kant and other thinkers. But what you said about dreaming and invention through dreaming, that reminded me of Susan Langer. Do you know her work at all?
I do know her work. I don't know it well, but
yeah,
tell us.
She talks about the importance of the relationship between art and dreaming, as a kind of a dreamlike, and how dreams kind of recontextualize things. So she has a kind of, says each art creates a certain kind of dreamlike or virtual image, which she then describes very, very suggestively. So that made me think of that. And in fact, I have an essay about her that I can send you if you want.
I would love it. I was just going to ask if there was any particular work, but send me the essay and then that will point me.
Yeah, there are two great works she wrote, Philosophy in a New Key, where she talks about music and how music articulates, kind of as new. It's all about symbolism, and the symbolism in music and different arts. But I also liked your idea of drift and invention. And in fact, the idea of recontextualizing things reminded me of your box image, being inside and outside the box, or, kind of. So it was very suggestive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for that. I'll look forward to reading more, both of your work and more about Susan Langer as well. Thank you.
She's very interesting writer.
So Jamil, I see you have your hand up. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Rosemary. I don't think I have much to add to what we have been listening to, which is just how powerful your presentation was. Very, very special, so unique, and in so many ways a reflection of the life of the mind in American society, which has lately not been easy to find a place in the national dialogue. But I think it's just wonderful, and I just wanted to say thank you. In the course, though, of listening to some of your comments, you mentioned that you grew up with a parent in the armed forces.
Air Force. My father was an Air Force pilot.
I'll be darned. I'm an Air Force brat as well. My dad was in the Air Force for 33 years, and I thought I would just I've noticed that others that I've observed having this beautiful perspective, actually, that you have of the world and of place and of yourself must grow from some sort of an experience that exposed you to different cultures.
Yeah.
And, your father was a Cold War warrior and they believed in a world that I think was beautiful in so many ways. And so I think it's wonderful to see you put that together with intellect and to put that together with the mission of higher education. And of course, the military experience that your father had, I think, in the 50s and 60s is different from the military experience of today, we know, and is unlike, I think, in some ways, any other military experience before the Cold War. But I don't know how you feel about that, but it just seems to me that the open-mindedness that you bring to your work and the reflection that you bring to your work is just so valuable. Finally, the last thing I want to say is I hope that you and Hal and others continue to work with the public as you're doing. Certainly, some of the sad things about today's national discourse is how little space there seems to be in so much of it about thoughtful reflection. It just doesn't fit into the way our media works and the way headline news works, but this is really the work of the heart and the work of the life. And it's also the work of vision. And I want to thank you for staying with us. I want to thank you for having such vigor in your retirement to share that way of seeing the world with others. And it's a gift. It's a gift not only to all of us connected to higher education, but for the public that have an opportunity to hear you as well. So thank you for today's presentation.
Well, that means a lot to me, especially coming from you and all the fantastic work that you've done for the humanities and life of the mind in Georgia and beyond. I do want to add that my father was a pilot in the Berlin airlift, arguably one of the greatest humanitarian efforts of many, many centuries. And that my mother bravely moved to post-war Germany before I was born with one child in tow, and I had another child born there. And that her ability to navigate these many places and for them to travel, my father was an Irish immigrant and my mother grew up at Isle of Hope, the place you've just seen, you know, from very cloistered environments, and to navigate this broader world was just, you know, remains a true inspiration to me. They lived to be 98 years old, each of them. So I had a good long spell with them. And my friend Randy right here remembers them too. And he has his hand up. Always good to hear from you, Randy.
All right, just to say it in front of everyone, thank you for this trip down memory lane. It was wonderful. And so just two quick things for you. So it appears that you're going to get a second chance here and you're laying the groundwork. I'm wondering if you're going to return to that acting career that you have. And the second thing is the one object that you talked about in the upper right-hand corner. No one's asked what that is. So if you could comment on both of those.
Yes, well, the acting career was very short-lived. Of course, I would do anything, anywhere, anytime that Brenda Bynum asked me to do, but I think my role became the sort of introducer of others. Yes, I don't know if you all recall that item that was in that upper right-hand corner. It would look like a little wooden object with some wires and a crossbar on it. Did anybody, do you remember it? A. And B, did anybody have an idea about what that might be? Well, I'll let you reflect on that for a minute, try to call it to mind, and I'll answer another question, and then there will be, I will reveal that as you try to think about it. I think I'd have a hard time finding it again, but just consider it while I take a question from Andy Namias.
I also love your approaches, which has many names. You're all within the eyes, and I do the rejuvenation, and I just brought up this book, which is The Origins of You, which also starts up not just where we were, but you go back to where you have been in different ways. And you've shown this very well. And I would think that we all who have retired, and I hate the word retired because you're not tiring really, hopefully. But when you rejuvenate or when you do what you've done, or what I'm always trying to find all the things that happen during one's life. And this is a great thing that Emory produced for us. Thank you.
Yes, we have much to be grateful for from Emory, and I do like the use of your term rejuvenation. So rather than retirement, perhaps that's the phase we're in. We're in a phase of our second, third, or fourth, or fifth chance of rejuvenation. I think that brings more life into what we're about collectively. Thank you.
Well, thanks.
And okay, yeah. So let me take a question. Oh, great, that was very smart of you to find that item. I think, shall I go ahead and say what this is, what this item is? Maybe Marilyn's gonna, her hand's up, maybe she's gonna make a guess. Do you know what?
Toilet roll.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a toilet roll holder. It's a musical one. You can see at the bottom there, the little wind up knob for the toilet roll holder. So as I said, my great grandfather, whom I never met but heard much about, was a very imaginative person. He had many different entrepreneurial streaks, not all of them successful, I might add, financially, but all good fodder for stories. Did you have another question, Marilyn?
Yes, the reason that's just incidental. I spent a lot of time in antique shops with my mother as a child, so that helps to be creative about that. When I first saw your topic and your write-up, this was several months ago, I was absolutely captured by that wonderful concept of drift and intention. Whether we name it, I think we go through it, and sometimes you think, what will my next project be? What will it be? Will it be? And I'm always thinking in terms of intention. I love drift, and I've been doing a lot of drifting through for the last few months. I think all of us have, and it's given me some ideas for intention. But drifting is a good thing, and I think that would make a wonderful book title if it's not already. But thank you for that. I think it gives you permission to change gears sometimes. And I think that's so important if you're going to be at all creative. So thank you for this. It was a lovely talk.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's been a very meaningful phrase for me. I think I dreamed it up, but who knows? I may have read it somewhere else, but it is a good idea for a book title. Thanks for that. And Brenda, who's going to keep us moving forward with uncluttered transitions and seamless ones as well.
Rosemary, this was an amazing morning, and I want to thank you in particular for acknowledging and recognizing that magical and precious moment in someone's life when the universe seems to give them permission to say, oh, yes, I am a poet. I guess I am a writer. I'm an artist. Whatever that moment is when you feel that full permission in life to be that thing which all of the CVs and qualifications and list of stuff in the world don't give you. It only comes from the heart. And thank you for acknowledging that. That's a brilliant moment. And with that said, I am already hard at work in my brain imagining a series of circumstances which would end up with Rosemary Magee being able to say to someone randomly, oh yes, I am an actor. Look forward to it. We'll do it.
I'm open. Wherever you lead or dream, I will follow.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for your presence, your attention. It's a reminder to us what Seamus Heaney said about, had I not been awake, it would not have happened. I would not have seen it happening. I would not have experienced it. So sharing this moment with me, and I just see so many names and faces of people who played such great roles, and the history department, the dance program, School of Theology. There's Brooks Holofield. He knew me when I was a graduate student as well. He served on my committee. So, we didn't know what was going to come from all of that, Brooks. And you know, family, friends, and the like. I really encourage all of us, first of all, to thank the Emeritus College and the Sheths naturally, but to stay in conversation with one another in the various forms and formats that takes. Of late, I've actually taken to writing a few letters, or, you know, old-fashioned things like that. But whatever form that conversation is, let's be a part of it together, and let's explore, continue to explore together our creative lives, and that we may find wonder in things that seem as, you know, just surrounding us, whether they may be flowers, books, or music boxes. And Gray, I think everybody who had a question or comment has.
Yes, except I was actually going to have some question. As a host, I can't raise my hand. But,
oh, okay.
You know, just if you could reflect a bit on creativity as it is in later life. And part of the reason I say that is because one of the things that has impressed me so much is how much creativity I see in our members in the Emeritus College. And of course, there's always this narrative of the young creative genius like Mozart or something. But it seems in hearing you that there is some richness of creativity that comes after a person has lived a lot of experiences that one perhaps wouldn't see in a young person who's just starting in that creative life. And I wondered if you had any reflections on that.
Well, I think all the things that I learned from the creativity conversations definitely are present in our lives right now and essential to creativity. And for me, I feel a greater sense of freedom than I did as a young person, as somebody who was mid-career. Perhaps it was the kind of jobs I had, which allowed for these great, wonderful things for me to be a part of and for them to unfold. But I feel a greater sense of freedom now. I'm okay with being more eccentric. I'm okay with being more withdrawn. I'm okay with being more or less engaged. I'm okay, you know, with reading things outside my normal spheres, learning new things, learning from, I mean, I really feel based on some of the talks that have been given at the Emeritus College, that if the opportunity ever arises for some of us to be part of any of these education and prison programs that exist, that I would love to be a part of that. You know, I'd love to teach, you know, English 101 again, or some version thereof, or other creative writing, or whatever it might be, in that setting. That would mean a lot to me. I hope it would mean something to others. So I don't feel as constrained, like the box that we talked about. You know, we're thinking inside the box. We have a more limited time frame in our lives. We don't know what's going to happen. Today seems especially unpredictable. But that means that we live, that there's lots of stuff within that box. There's angels and demons and opportunities and difficulties and opportunities. And instead of saying, okay, you know, I've got to, you know, get this promotion or accomplish this task or, you know, finalize this meeting or building or project, whatever, I have more freedom. I feel I have more freedom. And I hope that many of you have, despite other things that are closing in around us, you know, obviously people have family concerns, health concerns, other difficult matters that they're challenging them, their families. That's certainly true for me. But I also feel an incredible sense of, well, rejuvenation. We'll just use that word. I hope that's true for others as well.
Well, thank you again so much. I think it's just been a fantastic time. Of course, we've suffered by not being together in Governor's Hall with a lunch provided by the chefs, but it's been a great time, and we've been able to experience some things virtually that we couldn't in that setting. So thank you very much,